an interesting piece of history for those interested. So one day you're talking to Cavario, our man in Amsterdam.
What up, dog?
And he mentions a name.
He mentions the name Heavy.
Heavy. And he said Heavy was out of where? Brooklyn.
Out of Brooklyn.
He was selling dope in
Harlem. But he was
out of Brooklyn.
Out of Brooklyn, right? And Heavy's block in Harlem was either like 115 or 116.
It's like right next to Cavario's family.
Right next to Cavario's and them people block. Well, the name struck out because if you listen to Ron Giavalli, I almost got his name right. He was the chief DA agent on the big case, the Grand Hustle back in the 70s.
That investigated your father and Eddie Jackson Sr. back in the 70s.
These guys and all their activities, right?
And they mentioned their name?
The working premise that the DEA had was never that Eddie Jackson was being supplied by Carmine Lamondozzi and the Gangster.
So you mean all of them guys, all of your dad's crew and all them went to prison, did all that time? No one even told them, like, vaguely the plug was Italian? There wasn't the slightest bit of
that again speaks to the when we say nobody cooperated on that case
at all.
Nobody, like, we ain't.
No one even said there was some Italians in New York.
Nothing.
So they didn't even know who the supply was.
Nope. So through the raid on Hubble, Fairlee's, the 2 kilos seized from Fairlee rigs, the 10 kilos seized on Hubble, the purity led the DA to believe that the only black man who can get this quality of heroin would have to be dealing with the Italian mob. So they weren't far off. So they assumed that Eddie Jackson was the Detroit branch of what we call now, I guess in crime, the council. The Nicky Barnes.
The Black Mafia.
The Black Mafia of New York. Then it was reinforced because Eddie's under surveillance. He's picking up a guy from New York. On the way back to Detroit, they have some kind of car problems. So they get clean photos of Eddie, and they can identify that he's with this guy. The DA knows who this guy is.
Rufus Boyd.
Rufus, Mr. Boyd out of Harlem. So that just, they were like, that connected to that. They're like, see, Eddie is.
But you think at that time that was, that Brooklyn Heavy was getting it from.
It was inverted. Eddie had got the bag already from Doc Lamondozzi, right? And Heavy was just shooting a move.
Because really, Eddie was because Nicky Barnes didn't actually deal with the main member of the Mafia. He dealt with Matty Madonna, who was not a made member. He did his 20 years for that case. When he got out, they made him a capo. But he wasn't made. Whereas Eddie was dealing with actual members.
I mean, and I know when I first started saying this, and shout out to all my friends in Harlem, those are some of the realest guys who ever did this stuff. But it was a little unsettling to the hierarchy.
Yeah, like.
And I was like, but we know for a fact Eddie and Carmine Lamondozzi had a.
Well, you talked to Carmine Lamondozzi on the phone as a little
boy. Call the house once a week.
Yeah.
Right? And him and Eddie had a real relationship. It was a business relationship.
Yeah,
but no, Eddie wasn't dealing with middlemen or underlings. I mean,
Lamondozzi was considered the biggest, for the Gambinos, like at one time, the biggest earner because he was doing the heroin. He had a bunch of stuff going on.
Which is
him and his family stomped out an FBI agent at like their father's funeral. Like, they were rough people.
And that's why when Eddie pops in the joint, and you've heard all the stories when he was in Atlanta with other members of the Gambino family, very much like the Goodfellas movie, and he would be eating spaghetti and pasta with those guys because over that 7-year run, they weren't deep. So it's very, not that Heavy was, because he was a big shot, this boy.
Yeah.
He was a big fella. But everybody knew at that level that
but he was never a federal. He went to prison for in state court. He sold a half pound or a half pound of heroin to the New York Police Department in like 76 or something.
Wow.
And he went to state prison. So now, how does this all tie in for those of you old enough? Greased Lightning. Tell us about Greased Lightning.
So
What was Grease Lightning?
Grease Lightning, iconic movie. Anybody of my age, of the end of the beginning of the end of the baby boom or beginning of Gen X, will remember that when Richard Pryor was ascending, he made a movie that was kind of a tribute to the black NASCAR moonshine history. So people, like everybody, kind of know through pop culture that there was a trend. The down south, what good old boys.
Yeah, like race car driving is very now heavily associated. It's like it's almost like a joke, like white trash NASCAR.
But no, that's not this. And
that's a whitewash history.
it was a down.
It was a down south.
It was a down south thing, and as we know, that's where most African Americans come from.
Funny, when you know so much about American history, like so certain things that are just Southern, we associate it with being black, like soul food. Well, it's what everyone eats down south. And then on the flip side, moonshining and having cars that are like NASCAR, we think of as like associated with white. But I'm sure that part of the tradition of the black drug dealing and bootlegging and numbers running of people that came from the south to the north, part of that came out of the driving them cars.
I was going to say, anybody again of mine know that the generation before me, all those guys took pride in knowing how to fix cars and make cars go faster.
I remember in after hours in like old school when I was in the 90s, when I was 19 or 20, going to after hours that might be ran by some 50, 60-year-old man or woman back then. They would have
shots of white lightning.
And it really was like brought up from down south. Someone made it.
Out in the roof in Kalamazoo in my college days, you could still get, they call that bathtub whiskey.
So were they making that in Michigan, or was they coming from down south?
That bathtub whiskey. I think they were still getting it from down south back then.
Because it's like, it's people that pride themselves on that.
Jack Daniels, all those companies, Southern Comfort, Jack Daniels, if you go back, these were guys in the woods learning how to distill and brew. So all that tie in.
Okay, so speaking of Grease Lightning and the car thing, the reason I brought that up, when I was trying to look up Brooklyn Heavy, that's all we knew to go by was Heavy from Brooklyn.
Right.
I put on like Brooklyn Heavy Heroin 70s or something. And then you see a newspaper article, Rufus Boyd, and he's listed as one of the 10. There's an article called Black Mafia Takes Over from Whites, or the black man pushing the whites out in crime. Like on the New York Times, they did like a 5-part series in 76. Like it was a big deal. And he was one of the names. But so I found out his name, Rufus Boyd, and then you put in Rufus Boyd BK Heavy, and these Facebook groups of like elderly white people with blonde hair and blue eyes with like some funny language, and they all like, they have tribute pages to him, and I'm like, what is this? So he was big into the cars, he had a car racing team, and he was, I guess that circuit went over, it was big in Sweden, and BK Heavy is like a legend in Sweden for having these race teams and these beautiful cars. And there's whole tribute pages to him on Facebook, and there's nothing about any street. I don't know if those people knew who he was or what. There's all these pictures of him in Sweden, and they just talk about him like he's a race car team owner.
So he's all in the race car, right? His man Eddie is in Detroit. Well, Eddie, who owned, well, according to the authorities, one time had 100 Cadillacs on the street.
Is that, he had 100, or that he bought for them?
That he bought for people.
100 Cadillacs.
That's it. No, it was, yeah. Eddie used to Eddie was kind of guy, he was cool with you.
He buy a Cadillac?
Buy your Cadillac. And the people would ask him, like, hey, ain't I part of the crew? There's a great story, this guy DeWitt, who went to jail actually on the indictment. But somehow DeWitt had him a new Cadillac.
Somehow.
And he told the big man, like, hey man, what's going on? I thought I'm with you, right? DeWitt, he like, of course, DeWitt, you with my,
What's his name?
DeWitt.
DeWitt.
And
now what did DeWitt do, this general?
DeWitt
pushing the pants.
wound up getting hung upside down, wasn't he?
that the police ended up in Grosse Pointe, ended up dropping DeWitt.
Mixing up the jive? What, he was mixing up the jive for the white show?
No, he was a pimp. Like
a pimp. He wasn't pimping on no little Caucasian girl.
No. The Jackson organization was very segregation.
So it was avoided the Caucasians.
Caucasian, which served them well. But So so 100 Cadillacs, love Corvettes, love fast cars, but one of his most prideful ones, and I'm thinking it probably has something to do
Got it
with
from BK Heavy.
was his Trans Am pace car, the real Indianapolis 500 Trans Am pace car.
Pace car is the one when they start to race, it goes in front.
He bought 2 of them.
Eddie did.
Eddie
How
did.
the hell? I remember he did sell those. How the hell much did those would cost?
Oh, he was,
Whatever.
Whatever.
What year would that have been? That was in the 70s.
This was in the middle of the hustle, so you're talking somewhere between 73 and 75. And Black Butch tells a great story of him outrunning the police in that
I'm
Trans
sure.
Am.
Especially back then, the police
He
cars
drove all the
were
way
nothing.
to Toledo to dust them.
What were they doing? Were they doing a deal, or he just wanted to?
They,
He just didn't want to get pulled.
he
over?
just didn't feel like going to jail that day.
No.
Yeah.
Took him to Toledo.
To Toledo, and he was outrunning.
Oh, they must have been calling ahead.
And he would just zoop and then.
Because the police car in the 70s wasn't keeping up with no damn Trans Am.
No. So it's actually somewhere in our archives. So shout out to the Black Dispatch. He tells this story. So yeah, I'm now connecting the dots. Heavy's all into these race cars. Eddie's buying these pace cars from Indianapolis 500, which was a big deal,
So that just goes to those guys were much more, I guess, Renaissance men, or just they had a lot more different hobbies and interests. And the idea of like a hood drug dealer now being in Sweden with Swedish people with his car racing habit, it just, I don't know.
Or buying pace cars. And again,
People are able to operate at that level mentally now aren't probably selling drugs.
well, they are, but
Not
They-
at another level.
at another
I'm saying, like, if you're a black person in the United States, there's really such a ceiling on what you can do because it's hard to get beyond the street dreams because you're a U.S. resident. There's nowhere you can't send the money nowhere. You're kind of.
I mean, again, as I was just saying in my travels, you go around this.
When
you go around,
what do you want to say about what you were saying? Probably not much, but a little. That was pretty interesting.
There are numerous
Frank Matthews,
or would have been
Linda Matthews,
but there are people who still hitting licks and got enough sense
to just leave.
to just leave.
And what kind of life is that being in
Being rich.
somewhere in Africa?
Being rich is being
rich.
everywhere. Like being rich in Abuja, Nigeria, is not that different than being rich in London, England, or Tokyo.
Because you can get what you want.
Because rich people do and live like rich people live.
And all the global products.
Everything.
Luxury products are more widely available.
I was gonna say, so like
It's bullshit.
It's easier in Asia to get Gucci and Prada, and there's more Gucci, Prada, and Chanel stores spread out through Ho Chi Minh City and Hong Kong than there are.
And there's probably restaurants. So if you're in Ghana or Ghana or Nigeria, you can get what, high-end Thai food, Indian food, anything.
I just got to swear, I had a great Thai massage with girls from Thailand in Ghana. The world's gotten very, very, very small, but
more so at the upper income.
There is no amenity. Well, first of all, we black people, and you got to get all geopolitics. The richest black men in the world don't live in America; they live in Nigeria. Mr. Dankode, the richest black man on the planet, he's got more money than Oprah, Jay-Z, LeBron.
Oh no, those people don't
put
even
together.
No,
And if you list
all the black celebrities, don't even add up there.
Great man. All salute to Robert Smith, who's regarded, was just in town. Shout out to Frat too, A5A. He wouldn't make the top 20 in Africa.
No.
So, yeah, but I've met some people, shall we say, they can't exactly identify how their capital foundation came.
So there's
to be
so African Americans floating around over there. We just gonna say Frank Matthews, like they read between the lines. So you bump into a few just when you were there.
Yeah.
That you didn't know them. These are just people you're talking to, and you kind of like, what's up with you? And you're like, oh, I fled from City X and years.
Or usually it would be you from where you from. I'm from Baltimore. Oh, I got And now when we exchange 3-4 names of people we know,
They go, if you know them, you must.
and then you where
mess
you
around.
from? You from Detroit? Oh, I have some friends in Detroit. You don't know? You do. And then actually, not only do I know them,
That's all heroin with them.
I just
talked to
I
him.
just talked to him, and then and then the game gets to be the game. Be like, yeah, this third and the third happened, and I thought it was a good time for me to leave.
Yeah, because I know the Frank Matthews story is fascinating, but even in that era, there's other, your dad and Eddie's plug, John Claxton, he disappeared.
Before Frank.
Yeah, and he was a DEA major violator. He disappeared.
He was a multimillionaire his damn self. And again, we know Marion Wakefield.
So when we did the story on Marion Wakefield,
in the 80s. This is
she just ain't come to court. This was in the 80s.
And she for sure left with at least $5 million, 1983 money.
That's like 15 million now.
Maybe 84 money, right?
So she could have would you go to, what about, do you think a black fugitive could make it in the Caribbean, or is that too small?
I think it's too small and too much there are still people forget how large Africa is.
Yeah.
You can fit the United States, China, and all of Europe inside of Africa and still have a lot of land left over. So almost any major city, you ain't got to drive but 2 hours, 3 hours outside the city, and you off the grid. You can become Chief Courtney, who has blessed the community with this new school
Or running water.
and build you a nice situation, and then you don't never have to go, and then you know what? And the only thing that you say is, you kids with the internet, where's y'all another village over a little over there. But we over here, the elders, we don't like that technology. And you could be just off the grid. And
Even now.
Now, we in America still think, because cash is just, the global South is still a cash economy.
Yeah, like I was trying to give, that's another thing. You need to leave, please give me a $10 bill so I can tip the guy for bringing Lou's thing up, because me and Lou never had no cash.
So, right. You can do that in America. You can navigate your whole week, a month.
I never had no cash.
And when you in the global South, when you're in
Because you can even, so I've heard, if you're a person who indulges in mild indulgences of the recreational / female, like you can even not have, you can do that without cash.
Yeah.
So I've heard.
Where's my cash at the counter? No, anyway.
Hey, I don't mess with Trap Act. If you ain't got PayPal or Zelle, I can't trick with you.
Yeah, that's true. I thought, they broke me down, Lou. I had the cash out. I don't know.
Now you got to be an understanding citizen. You got to have a real bank account.
Yeah.
To get some money out of me.
But in the global South, in South America, in Africa, in Asia, it is still a cash world. So, again, a guy hit a lick, a woman hit her a lick, and got the good sense, unlike a lot of my associates and family who, but you got to have you do have to have a whole different mindset. You have to have a global mindset. You have to have a willingness to understand and know that I can live just as fly in Nairobi, Kenya, as I can in Dallas, Texas. And if I stay here in Dallas, Texas,
I'm going to prison
because I was dealing with 20 people, 16 of them, 20 just got indicted yesterday. And what's the word we were just joking about?
Superseding.
The superseding indictment.
That's what happened with the BMF. There was like 5 indictments around the country. The first one was in Detroit. Like, it's funny when I interviewed Blue Da Vinci, and that was when they were accusing him of snitching. But he was like, time he got indicted, a bunch of people had already been sentenced. How was he snitching? Like, someone who probably, in one of them first 2 indictments, probably put his name in it.
Yes. For real. Gotta shut it out.
Okay.
All right.
Boom. Brooklyn Heavy.
Look them up. Look for it on Al Prophet. Look for it on Big Boss Filmworks. It's going down. BSD. If you didn't know, Beyond Street Dreams.
Back to the freak off.
That would be BS.